Good evening, everyone. I know we're live right now. We're just going to give everyone a couple minutes to hop on. We'll give everyone another minute for everyone to hop on before we get started. Okay, I think we should rock and roll. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited. This is actually our first ever Pennsylvania Reform Alliance Town Hall. Appreciate you all hopping on this evening, especially during March Madness, to learn more about reform and what we're doing here in Pennsylvania. Tonight, I hope you leave with a better understanding of who we are at Reform, but also with a little bit of sense of excitement and encouragement and a willingness to want to get involved to help us change the probation and parole system as we look to build safer communities and pathways to success for justice impacted individuals. A lot of you may already be involved in this space, and I hope you leave here tonight excited about our mission and help us find areas where we can collaborate and move forward. But I think before we really get started, I think it's important for us as Reform Alliance to introduce who we are, our mission, and our approach. Reform Alliance is a national organization working to transform probation and parole in America. We've actually already passed 16 bills in 10 different states, creating pathways for about 650,000 individuals to exit the system. And we're hopeful this year that we can add Pennsylvania and make that number 11. Right now, there are actually 4 million people that are on either parole or probation across America, which is nearly double the amount of people that are incarcerated. One of our goals here at Reform is we don't want people to be trapped in the revolving door from supervision to prison. We want them to go from supervision into a stable environment where they can reenter with dignity, where they can create meaningful pathways to work. And we just want to make sure that we can equip them with the tools to succeed, which will eventually translate into stronger families, stronger communities, and also safer communities. But also for our approach, our mission is not just to change laws. We're working to reform America's justice system with a more restorative justice that is fair, accountable, and actually that we reinvest in rehabilitation. And I think our approach really reflects that. We want to help as many people as possible, but we just don't stop there. We want to make sure that they have jobs, that they have stability in their lives, that they have wellness. As you can see, our work encompasses building coalitions to change policy, changing the narrative, engaging the private sector, and supporting on the grassroots level. In addition to Reform's legislative work, we're focused on a couple of other things, creating job opportunities through our job fair program. We had a job fair last year in Philadelphia and hopefully potentially like to do one out west this upcoming year. We also offer mental health resources to system impacted individuals. We're partnering with community organizers, reentry groups, businesses, no matter what size. And that's really what encompasses in our PA Safety Coalition. Our PA Safety Coalition is led by Reform, but it's powered by a broad, bipartisan group of organizations and businesses supporting our work in the legislature and beyond. As we continue throughout tonight, I'd also like to introduce myself. My name is Cody Bright. I'm the Northeast Regional Director. I joined Reform actually in December 2022, just hit 3 months today. I graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree in government, politics, and policy. And prior to my time at Reform, I worked and ran political campaigns across Pennsylvania, all the way from state rep to governor to United States Senate. I'm also in 2021, I won election for a township supervisor position in Chester County. Really excited about that. Was very exciting. And then the most exciting thing of all, my wife and I actually just recently adopted a 7-year-old red tick hound dog, and his name is Fader. But enough about my dog. I'm just really excited to introduce our new PA State organizer, Eric Van Zandt. Eric, take away.
Thank you, Cody. I appreciate that. Good luck with the dog. Want to say thank you, first of all, Cody. And I want to say thank you also to Reform. As Cody said, recently I was hired, February actually, and Reform, I believe, actually sees rather the need for organization on the ground in Pennsylvania, with Cody as the regional director and myself now as the state organizer. I think we can see that Reform is committed to Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, everywhere in between, Pittsburgh and Harrisburg. And so with that, one of the things that I bring to the table is an understanding of conflict resolution and restorative justice, understanding the need to create a nexus between folks that may see things one particular way and not necessarily have the ability to get together with somebody from the other side of the aisle or somebody maybe with an opposing viewpoint. So with that in mind, we recognize the need for collaborative efforts. And in those collaborative efforts, hopefully we can reach a common goal in Pennsylvania. And so with respect to creating that nexus, one of the things we do is collaborate with other groups. For example, on Monday, I was in State College area with another organization, and we were in the Rockview and Benner prison, and we were taking a tour with a state representative and trying to get them to understand some of the nuanced things that are going on with respect to those that are incarcerated. Those that are incarcerated, as well as those that are in society now, whether on probation or on parole, are the people that we're trying to assist. Right now, Reform has drafted and are working on probation legislation. Also in Pennsylvania, we will also be working in the future on parole legislation. Reform is designed to change the law. That's what Reform is doing. That's what I, in the state of Pennsylvania, am going to be doing, trying to enroll people in the coalition so that we can go ahead and change laws that have to do with probation and parole. It isn't going to happen overnight. We understand that. It isn't reinventing the wheel. We understand that. It's about respecting those that came before, and it's about reforming the conversation and turning it into something that is conducive to success. I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to go ahead and be that catalyst if you allow me in the state of Pennsylvania. I appreciate it. And with that, I want to turn it over to Mr. Darrell Frazier, our manager of memberships.
Thank you so much, Eric. So happy to have you on the team. You know, it's been a pleasure being able to work alongside you since February. And I know that we're going to do some amazing things now that you're here with Reform. Good evening, everyone. My name is Darrell Frazier. I have the pleasure of serving as the manager of memberships and community engagement. I'm so ecstatic to be on here with you all tonight. I have a special place in my heart for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You all are just such a joy to be able to build relationships with and do some amazing work. Since I've started on my career journey with Reform about almost a year ago now, my year anniversary is coming up. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania specifically has been, a place where I've been able to be heavily involved, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. Here at Reform, our department simply works to mobilize our criminal justice reform members to become advocates on every single level, whether it's through state campaigns or national. We're dedicated to helping our community of reformers to make meaningful impact in their local systems. And that's through grassroots engagement. We do that in order to foster vibrant and to create a connected community of reformers who are passionate about systems change, and that you all are. I see some familiar faces, some names in the group chat. I just want to shout you all out and say hello. And then those of you who are new to the space, welcome. Our main goal is to build as big of a tent as possible, right? The more folks we include in our community of reformers, the better. And that includes people who have critiques or different views on our bills. Their participation pushes us to be better with our approach. It's true. We've faced opposition on our bills before, and that's when expanding our membership base becomes more important now more than ever. We work to bring in as many people as possible in our community so that we can listen to their input and create community with. For example, we have the pleasure of spending time with a lot of you at Made in America last year, where we were able to engage a lot of attendees who were from Philadelphia, who was from other areas outside in Pennsylvania, and even beyond just there, who travel just so that they can come and enjoy the festival, but to also learn a lot more about reform, right? What does it mean to be a reformer? How can they get more involved? A lot of people were being educated and was bringing awareness to a lot of the criminal justice issues that are impacting their family, their friends, their community as a whole. Such events just as that, we have one coming up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania very soon. It's our Community Day of Action. It's going to be held on Saturday, April the 8th at the XYE Community Center in South Philly. One such event that's coming up, at this event, we want to raise awareness about the importance of second chances and connect returning citizens with community grantees who provide direct services. Our main goal is to support their successful reentry. We'll discuss the importance of Pennsylvania Coalition more during the policy session of today's town hall, but the point is we want to cast as wide of a net as possible. We cannot do this work without you who are all on the ground. Grassroots engagement matters. And so in our case, we are looking to have you all join us on this journey by becoming reformers. Very simple, right? Our areas of focus as reformers is our engagement. We also want the community to believe that their engagement is critical. It's a critical component in this fight for criminal justice reform. We're committed to creating opportunities for our members to engage as well and to uplift the work that you all are doing in your communities, and how we can amplify the messages that you all are sending. Next slide, please. And so what does it mean to be a reformer, right? The first step to getting more involved is becoming a part of being a part of our mission, which is to simply become a reformer. When you become a reformer, you aren't simply just supporting a cause, right? You're joining a larger community of criminal justice reform advocates who are super passionate about this work. In addition of camaraderie, right, and the connection that comes along with being a part of a larger community, by working together with others, you create a real and lasting change and make a positive impact on the lives of others. Ultimately, being a reformer is about more than just advocating for a cause. It's about being a part of a community that is dedicated to creating a better world for all. Next slide, please. Why should you become a reformer, you ask? One, you believe in second chances. Two, you have a desire and a will for justice and fairness. Three, you have been personally impacted or you know someone who had been impacted by the criminal justice system. And there are also benefits of being a reformer as well. Joining our membership, you get access to, as Cody stated earlier, BetterHelp Credits, which is a mental health platform that provides online mental health services directly to consumers. And you can take advantage of our Applied Digital Skills Training, which is a free online platform that offers a variety of interactive courses that provides individuals to develop their digital skills as well. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. I hope that you were able to learn a little bit more about our membership programs tonight, and I look forward to answering questions later on during the town hall. Now, I would like to kick it back over to Cody.
Thanks so much, Jarrell, going over what it means to be reform and all the benefits along with that. But now I'm really excited to introduce our Senior Director of Policy and Law, someone who's been terrific during my time. She's just incredible overall. But Erin Haney, please, it's your time.
Amazing. Thank you so much. My goodness, I feel like I learned a lot listening to you all tonight already. So Cody, Eric, Darrell, really appreciate you and your leadership on this. And I'm really excited to talk to everybody tonight about our policy and law department at Reform Alliance. So as Eric said, we exist to change laws. And I think as Darrell really helped put it in context, right? In addition to that, we are also aiming to change, culture and narrative, and really all of the context around our broken supervision system, right? But one of the most important things that we do is, in fact, change the law. If we change people's attitudes and culture, but you still walk into a courtroom and there is no way out for you and no option, then we haven't done enough. Right. And so it's extraordinarily important that beyond just changing narrative and culture, which is incredibly difficult in and of itself, that we also change the law. All of those things need to go together. And so Reform's policy and law department focuses on just that. Right. And it focuses on doing that at all levels of the government. So federal, state, county. We're now even looking at international need for supervision reform and learning from other countries that are doing this better, as well as creating some helpful guidelines for places that are falling behind. One of Reform's core beliefs is championing the stories of those directly impacted. You've heard a few of our folks mention that already. To do this, we leverage our organizing and storytelling capacity through working closely with the other departments and organizations that you've already heard from. Our key goals are supporting the reimagining of community supervision, grounding the policies we advocate for in evidence-based practices, and improving the lives of thousands through legislation. So what does that mean exactly, right? How do we do that? And why supervision, right? So you've heard already that there are double the people under supervision than there are behind bars. And so when we talk about focusing on supervision as a policy framework for reform to change these laws, what does that mean in practice? What does that mean that we're looking at, right? And so we look at a prison to freedom pipeline. So the very first area of our work on this prison to freedom pipeline is from incarceration to community, right? So ensuring that we are bringing people out from cages and into the community. And to do this, we identify opportunities to safely release people from incarceration. And some specific examples of that, which are listed on the slide here, usually involve changing opportunities and pathways to release through parole, right? And so that can be increasing parole options, whether that's through elder parole, medical reprieve, second look, juvenile parole, or whether it's through changing the actual practices of the parole board itself or the governing authority, right? Ensuring that there are people who are directly impacted themselves, making decisions on parole boards, ensuring that the decisions are transparent, and ensuring that the process protects folks' rights. So really, again, this first area, and you heard Eric say that we hope to do some parole work in Pennsylvania going forward. As he already stated, our bill this year is specifically about probation. But that would bring us to this first bucket of work that we do, ensuring that we get more pathways for people to get out of cages, out from behind bars, and into the community. So the second bucket of work is what happens essentially when somebody's in the community and on supervision. So you've supported folks getting out from the cage and into community, but how do we change punitive monitoring to supportive reentry, right? We know that while probation and parole as supervision may have been intended as alternatives to incarceration, they unfortunately have become the primary driver of incarceration. So far, unfortunately, from being supportive in the reentry process, all too often they end up serving as trap doors back to prison or jail. And so what can we do that will improve people's experience and will ensure that they have effective support? So for that, we look at evidence-based practices, including the length of supervision. So ensuring that we have policies where less truly is more. We know from studies that actually keeping folks on supervision for longer periods of time doesn't just give you a diminished return, but actually can harm public safety, right? Can actually increase recidivism. So ensuring that we are shortening lengths of supervision in a safe way, ensuring that we're incentivizing folks. And you're going to hear about this later, right? One of the examples that the American Probation and Parole Association uses is rather than referees, right? We would like probation officers to be coaches. So rather than somebody just standing by and saying, you're stepping out of the line and assessing a consequence. The idea is that if we are going to have supervision and supervision officers, we want folks to be supportive, to be rooting people on, to be helping figure out where folks have needs and how to fill those needs, rather than just looking at punishment. So another way of looking at that is we need less stick, more carrot. So we need to have incentives for education, for work, for treatment, for all kinds of stuff that we know actually not only reduces recidivism and therefore increases public safety, but also increases the success of folks in reentry altogether. So that's really, a number of the things that we look at, from ineffective to smart supervision, right? Which also includes conditions. And so this is a lot of the work that reform has done so far. When you heard Cody mention our 16 bills in 10 states, a lot of that work has been focused here. And you're going to hear a little bit more about how this plays out when we talk about potential solutions in Pennsylvania. So this last piece here is from supervision to wellness, right? So let's say we're in the position where folks have gotten out of cages and now they've had a supportive form of reentry rather than punitive monitoring. And so they're now off of supervision. It's not enough to simply say, well, okay, now the person is off of supervision, and so we've done what we needed to do. The point is that we want folks to be off of supervision and all the way into wellness, to have supportive jobs, to have fulfilling jobs, to have housing, to have communities really where they are contributing and that are contributing in meaningful ways to their lives as well. And so really the job fair work that we do is a big part of that. We've started doing a lot of work looking at second chance employers, but also looking at issues related to credit and housing, and a number of other barriers to wellness, and figuring out how to help break those down in order to make sure that people are supported as much as possible. And I do want to say before we move on to the next slide, while this is the policy framework, it's really important for me to emphasize that the specifics of what happens comes entirely from folks on the ground, and specifically from people who are directly impacted. So we have absolutely gone into jurisdictions where this has been our framework, and we've had some ideas about what might be useful based on evidence, and we've completely scrapped all of those ideas to instead reevaluate and really pursue and champion the goals of the folks on the ground. And so, we do not have, you can see on the bottom of the slide, it says we do not have a one state fits all approach. Essential to working with our community partners, and especially directly impacted folks, is framing the problem and then coming up with viable solutions. And so, as Darrell said, we want to know, if there are things about what we're doing that you dislike, that we can do better. If there are things that you think are harmful, if there are things that you think are great, we are constantly evolving and learning, and we welcome that. We welcome that information because we believe it will make things better and it will create a better bill. So that being said, in terms of what we learned from our partners on the ground then, right, and from talking to folks who were directly impacted and from stakeholders on all sides of this issue, as we just said, right, for that policy framework, one of the most important things is actually framing the problem, right? So I think it's natural to want to step forward into solutions right away, and that's incredibly important. We don't want to just highlight problems. We actually want to have meaningful solutions. But in order to have those appropriate solutions, we need to make sure that we're framing the problem correctly. And that's really, again, step one, where we go to our partners on the ground to make sure that we're understanding what the actual real problems are day to day. And so in the past several years through this work, and through the data collected by partners on the ground, but also through the stories that we've heard, I think more importantly in many ways, Pennsylvania having the 5th highest population under community supervision in the entire country is staggering. That's 1 in 51 adults in the Commonwealth who are under supervision. That's shocking. And no matter how many times I hear that, I don't ever want to be callous to that. That's incredibly disheartening and shows that there is a real need for reform. And connected to that, right? Pennsylvania is also one of the few jurisdictions that still allows felony probation terms to be as long as the statutory maximum length of incarceration. So one of the reasons why there are so many people on supervision in Pennsylvania has to do with the fact that we don't limit the terms of supervision. We don't have meaningful check-ins. We don't have meaningful reviews that allow people to get off on early discharge. And so we don't have limits on supervision in Pennsylvania, right? So people can remain on probation for years and years on end with no meaningful chance of early discharge, even if they're doing everything that they should be doing. The other thing that contributes to this is that Pennsylvania allows stacked supervision terms. This is something that took me a while to get my head around. So Pennsylvania allows somebody to have multiple terms of supervision that run consecutive. So supervision that gets stacked on top of itself. So let's say you come out, you're on parole for 5 years, you somehow follow all of the conditions and all of the requirements, and you're reporting to your parole officer. You're doing great. You have a great rapport with that officer, and so they're lessening the number of conditions and check-ins. And so after being on parole for a while, you finally are done. And so at that point, rather than getting credit for all of that time and understanding that you are far past ready to be on your own, if you have a stacked split sentence, then it means that you may have another probation term after that for another 5 years, where suddenly you have a new supervision officer with new terms, new conditions that you have to learn how to navigate, and an additional, double or more supervision term. Again, it doesn't make much sense. It doesn't make sense fiscally. It certainly doesn't make sense on a human level. And so a lot of the stories that we've heard so far really go to that issue. Finally, I think the other issue, and this is something that folks hopefully are aware of and that have been talked about quite a bit, but it's something that was one of the most shocking things to me when we talked about the issues in Pennsylvania, is that people often go back to prison or go to prison even sometimes for the first time on a non-criminal technical violation, right? So not because somebody has broken the law while they're under supervision, but because somebody has broken a rule, right? So if you miss a meeting with your probation officer, if you go over into the neighboring county to pick up your child from school, if you go to visit a relative, even in your same county, but who's also on supervision, right? These are all things that can result in technical violations where you can end up incarcerated. And that's obviously devastating in any number of ways, and not just for the individuals who end up back incarcerated, but also for the entire community who's missing an important person, a talented individual, often a father or a mother who suddenly is ripped out of the community, again, not because of a danger to the public, not because of even committing a crime, but because of a rules violation. So what are the solutions? And I think that it's so important to really, really stress here that we want everyone in this tent. We recognize that there are many, many more solutions than are listed here. And we recognize that some of these solutions that are listed may not actually, feel like the right ones to folks, right, in the coalition. And we want to hear that, right? We want to be able to discuss that. We want to be able to figure out why we ended up with some of these and which ones we can and should change. And so the Pennsylvania Safety Coalition is really what helps us do that. It's our bipartisan group of concerned Pennsylvanians who are working together to strengthen our communities and improve public safety by making our supervision system work well for everyone. Coalition members include systems actors, advocacy organizations, representatives from the private sector, concerned citizens, and more. It's truly a diverse coalition, all with the same goal of reforming the system for the better. And each legislative cycle, we get an opportunity to do that. So, I know we had a coalition last year. We hope that this coalition will be bigger, and we hope that we can do better. And we hope that we can get some of these evidence-based solutions that will work for everybody passed into law. And so there are some big categories. Again, these are sort of general categories. The first one being increasing transparency, reducing recidivism, and cutting down on these unnecessarily long supervision terms. So increasing that transparency and feedback between a supervision officer and the person they're supervising is vital. You can't succeed if you don't know what you're doing right or wrong, and if you don't know what's expected of you. So making sure that there are those check-ins where you aren't just getting told when something is actually a mess up or there's a consequence, but where you're getting real feedback and transparency, and limiting the amount of time that somebody spends on supervision. Lots of people on supervision do extraordinarily well in spite of the number of conditions that they have to navigate, right? We want to make sure, again, that it is not all stick, no carrot, and that there are in fact incentives and rewards when people are doing well, and when they're going above and beyond, especially with activities that reduce recidivism, like education and work and treatment. So ensuring that you have an opportunity for early discharge at set evidence-based time periods, but that opportunity can also be accelerated when you're engaged in some of these incentivized activities. The second piece of this is reducing and eliminating counterproductive conditions. So in addition to offering incentives for the great things that folks are doing while they're on supervision and ensuring that we're limiting time periods to what actually works, we also want to make sure that some of those conditions that we know don't work, and that we know are really just punitive, and sort of cause for technical violations when they aren't risk to public safety, we want to make sure that we are getting rid of those conditions and reducing those. For example, not being allowed to travel to other jurisdictions. We know that this can be a huge problem for parents who need to go see their kids, right? Who may be in school in the county next door. It can also be a huge problem for people who have employment opportunities, right? Not being able to travel is incredibly problematic. So looking at some of those conditions that we know in fact cause these technical violations, and really reducing or eliminating those altogether is important. Another part of what we've looked at as solutions is graduated sanctions for technical violations. Again, the idea that you can be put in prison, that you can be put in a cage, not for breaking a law, but for breaking a rule, is contrary, at least to everything I was taught in law school, and I think should remain shocking to most of us. So ensuring that, like many other states in the nation, Pennsylvania has graduated sanctions, preventing that from happening, making sure that there are intermediate sanctions rather than, you break one rule and you could go back to prison for years. You could lose your home, you could lose custody, you could lose your job. Ensuring that we have prohibitions to prevent that from happening is an incredibly important piece of the solution. In line with that, making sure that all monetary obligations and any related violations for failure to pay all include evidence about a person's ability to pay, so that we can make sure that people are not being punished for poverty, which is unconstitutional. Ensuring that people are not having their probation extended, that they're not having violations accrue because they don't have money to pay these excessive fines and fees and costs that have added up, right? The only time that somebody should be able to be punished in any way for not being able to, not fulfilling a monetary obligation, is if there is actual proven evidence that the person had the ability to pay and just willfully refused, right? And we know for most people on supervision, that is simply not the case. And then lastly, we talked about it already a little bit, but stacked sentences, right? Which in some ways embody kind of all of the problems that we've been talking about. The idea that you could be under supervision for 5 years, not break any laws do really well, and then suddenly be transferred to another officer and be under supervision for another 5 years with a different set of terms and conditions. And I really want to credit so many of our partners on the ground for really, really helping us understand the importance of this, the havoc that this wreaks on lives, the impossibility that it creates also for departments, right, who need to save precious resources and are then wasting time essentially supervising somebody who's already done amazing things for the last 5 years. It was really through their eyes that we were able to prioritize and uplift this. So, these are really, again, I want to stress, these are some of the possible legislative solutions. So many of you who are on here have already contributed to these. It's why we understand these as problems and solutions. So I want to thank everyone who's tuning into this, but especially those who have already contributed. And I really want to encourage folks to please, help us continue to understand this. We want to make sure that your voices are first, that you're leading, and that you hear, your solutions really echoed in the text of the law, that hopefully we could all work to pass this session. So I want to throw it back to Cody now. I know that was a lot of policy, but I really appreciate everyone tonight for hanging in there with us.
Thank you, Aaron. That was awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time to let us all know and inform us all. So, but now it's a really important time. We want all of your feedback. We want you to ask some questions. Happy to refer, if I don't know the answer, refer to someone else on our panel here. But at this time, we'd just like to leave the comment section open right now and see if we have anything. Okay, so it looks like we have one question from Miss Marcia, who's a great coalition member. Her question is state parole included in your coalition? I know that, I'll just hand that over to Erin because she has some great relationships here in the state. So Erin.
Sure. And I'd love to have Eric speak on it as well. But yes, absolutely. So, and I think Eric was the one who flagged this earlier. Right now, the bill that we're focused on is looking at probation. We understand that this system is completely interconnected, right? I used to represent people on death row. I used to work with people on death row. And while those people aren't on supervision, right, having those folks on death row means that there's an interconnection between that piece of the system and the rest of it. Right. And so we understand that, especially when it comes to different types of supervision, like parole and probation, they are completely connected, even if they may be governed and sort of run by and overseen by different folks. And so definitely having people a part of the coalition who are experts on state parole and who can help inform both probation reform going forward, but also opportunities in the future to do parole reform. That's incredibly important. And so that's a really important piece of our coalition. And we really hope that folks who are experts in that and who have experiences there will continue to join us.
Great. Thanks, Erin. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment box.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alrighty, so it looks like we have a question from Gina. If a person has passed his minimum and is awaiting trial, can he still be held in work release under a parole detainer?
Ooh, that is a great question, Gina. So this is an area, and this is something that's interesting. I think it came up quite a bit last session, especially with respect to the detainers. So, it's a good question, and I don't pretend to be an expert in the detainers now. What I can say is that as of now, the bill does not touch the detainer law. And so certainly one of the things that we'd love to do is learn a little bit more about some of the issues there. My understanding of your question is that one of the issues with detainers, with supervision detainers, is that people can be held almost indefinitely, oftentimes, subject again to Gagnon hearings. So I do want to note that there are some guidelines, but that those detainers are hugely problematic. Our bill looks at a sort of a different piece of supervision, but that's definitely something that I think we want to hear more about and hear about how we might be able to help with solutions there as well.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Oh, good. We got some questions flowing in here. I like that. Why don't we go on over to Keith's question? Keith is a great guy and part of our coalition. His question is, why lifetime parole for juvenile lifers?
Yeah, Eric, you want to take that? I can follow up after you if you want. Yeah,
I'm sorry. It's not humor. It's not humorous, but it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. We were having a conversation, my colleagues and I, earlier about this, and one of the important points that I think we came away with that specific conversation around that specific question was that things happen in time. And with respect to what reform is doing right now, I have to answer it like this. I have to frame it like this. Reform is right now moving to get probation legislation on the books and help people that are affected, directly impacted and indirectly impacted by probation. Just like there's some draconian parole laws that affect juvenile lifers, that affect all lifers. We can even talk about death by incarceration and how some of those men and women are deserving of parole. Right now, what reform is doing is concentrating on probation legislation. In the future, I would love it. I'm a juvenile lifer. I would love to see Reform Alliance move in the direction of relief for juvenile lifers that are on lifetime parole. And that's another reason why I'm in the conversation. If you are in the conversation, you can affect change. You're a lot less likely to affect change if you're not involved. So everybody, Craig, everybody, Freddie, Noel, I see a lot of people on here. Everybody needs to be engaged in the conversation. You need to bring what you know and your unique circumstances to the conversation. We are in position to make a good move, but we can't really make the best move for everybody involved and be as inclusive as we would like to be if you're not engaged in the conversation. So moving forward, that's another reason why Darrell stresses to become a member. That's what we need. The inclusive nature of reform is what can go ahead and create a longevity type based coalition. Moving forward into the future, we're all engaged. We're all getting some kind of relief, hopefully. So I know that's a long answer for your question, but it's one about inclusivity.
And if I can just add real quick, Keith, we actually have worked on some limits to parole. In fact, not just for juvenile lifers, but lifetime parole for everyone in other states. So when Cody referenced some of the 16 bills in 10 different states, that is something that reform works on and wants to continue to work on, right? So just because it's not something that's happening this legislative cycle in Pennsylvania doesn't mean that it's not something that reform is not only interested in and open to, but as Eric said, the more input we have and the more we're able to connect with folks and the more we understand what folks want and what direction to go in, that's what drives this. So that's why, if you sign up, as Darrell said, to be members and can help us better understand where to go next, once we hopefully pass probation reform, we would love to start looking at other avenues that we can be supportive on.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Eric, for those answers. Let's go over to Donald Rivers' question. I think this is a pretty easy question that we can knock out of the park. Are we organizing in Philadelphia? The answer is yes, but Darrell, if you don't mind, giving the date and the information for our upcoming event actually in April in Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your question, Donald. We are invested in community, as I stated earlier. And so we have an upcoming event that is going to be held on April the 8th, Saturday, April the 8th, from 1 to 5 at the XYE Community Center on 26th Street in South Philadelphia. We have more information to come. It's going to be posted on our social media, and also it's going to be sent out to our listserv via email. So stay tuned for that. And I'll also add some of the details and information in the chat so that you can be able to receive that. But absolutely would love for you to attend, share the information amongst your community, your family, your friends who you think can take advantage of the resources and the programs that will be there. A lot of our grantees who are providing direct services to justice impacted communities are going to be tabling at the event. Some of them are on this call right now. So it's going to be a great time. So looking forward to it. So definitely want to encourage you to attend, Donald.
Great. Thanks, Darrell. Great. The questions are flowing in. I love it. Just a comment here from Miss Curry Nixon. I think this addressed to you, Aaron, that she actually has a resident that has to respond to 7 different counties.
Wow.
And either one of those counties could violate her. And she stresses about how none of these counties actually coordinate or communicate with each other. So because of that, our reentrants suffer. So
Miss Curry Nixon, let's make sure that we connect. I know you're already connected with folks on here, but would really appreciate hearing more about that, because that is one of those horror stories that I think a lot of folks, don't always hear about and really should, right? This is incredibly nonsensical for everyone involved, but especially for the resident who has to deal with that.
Absolutely. We got a question here from Allison. Allison asks, where can I find the relevant laws for Allegheny County that would specify if, for example, individuals could be incarcerated for a technical violation?
Great question. God, these are such good questions. I knew in Pennsylvania we were going to have really good technical questions. I have to say, these are very sophisticated, excellent questions.
Thank God we have you, Aaron.
No, I was going to say, I think maybe a lot of the people in the comments, I'm sure, could answer this better than I can. So, one of the things, and this sort of goes right back to the example we were just given with somebody having a report to 7 different counties, as this question underscores, different counties have different rules, right? They do. And so some of the hope here is to at least create a sort of an outward standard, right? So that if counties are doing things better, if they're allowing for more due process, for fewer technical violations that result in incarceration, all that, that's great. But we want to at least sort of have something that says, at least at the very outer limit, hopefully all of these counties can agree that we aren't going to do certain things, right? Like we aren't going to incarcerate somebody on a first technical violation, or something like that, right? So for Allegheny County, the main thing that you can do is you can go to the probation website. What I will say again is that for most counties, and I certainly don't want to speak out of turn, I definitely don't know a lot about Allegheny specifically, but what I can say is that because they all have different programs and there's a lot of discretion within the systems that they run, one of these things about transparency is that it may not be immediately evident depending on the county, right? So it may not be something that they state explicitly, and so it can sometimes be hard to figure out, and that's part of the reason why we want increased transparency and at least some basic, again, outer limits so that if there is more flexibility and more allowance for the folks that are on supervision, that would be great, but we at least know what the very basic sort of floor is by creating and standardizing some of these rules. So again, I would suggest looking at Allegheny County Probation's website, but I will be interested to hear if it's one of the counties that really spells it out or not.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions before we have to wrap up. One of the questions is from Booker the Boss. Does mandatory supervision constitute a direct consequence or collateral consequence of the guilty plea?
Interesting. I think it's sort of, and I want to make sure that I'm not sure that I completely understand the question, so I don't want to mess it up. But I think in terms of supervision, so there are some offenses, right, that require supervision. And then there are some where supervision is ordered, where they can or can choose not to order supervision, right? So it depends really on the offense, on the court. But I really, I want to understand a little bit better. And so please feel free to contact us so we can talk more about that. I want to make sure that I fully understand the question. But I would say it's often, a consequence, not only of a guilty plea, but of any sort of finding of guilt. But it ends up often being sort of a collateral consequence because people end up doing far longer than what was originally ordered. And they end up having far more barriers than what was, disclosed to them at the time of the plea or the finding of guilt.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Question from Jackie. Will the focus going forward be on both addressing technical violations and addressing excessive probation sentences like consecutive sentences and lengthy tails?
Yeah, great question, Jackie. And some of this will depend a lot on, Eric and Darrell and Cody and what folks on the ground are saying. But from a policy perspective, I think the focus will be on ensuring evidence-based practices that increase public safety, and that reduce unnecessarily punitive and costly measures, right? And when I say costly, I mean both in terms of finances, but also the human cost. And so some of the ones that we went over, I think technical violations is a really big one because most people can understand how outrageous and unfair that is. Lengthy sentences like the stack sentences and the never ending probation terms, that's another one. But also, the incentives, which I guess go to sort of shortening supervision sentences, but making sure that we are really rewarding people for doing the amazing things that so many people on supervision do, and not just, again, like monitoring and punishing, but really actually respecting and acknowledging the contributions and making sure that translates into something real, right? So I think incentives is another big part of the direction that we'll go in, but I'd love to pass it over. I know it's a policy question, but I'd love to hear, I think some of the other folks on the panel could probably give great answers based on the folks they've been talking to as well.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Eric or Darrell, did you want to add anything to that?
I would absolutely say that one of the important things with respect to reform's position is it's a position, again, of inclusivity. Mm-hmm. The conversation that we have is based on information that we get. There's policy and there's a conversation about what we think the law should look like based on relief because of what people say. So this is all information that we take back and process, and we realize what needs to be changed. Darrell spoke earlier about becoming a member, and he also spoke about the need for stories. When you can talk about real time, how things affect you, we can put that in front of people, in front of the powers that be, in front of the people that need to hear it. It's something we can package up and put in front of people. And at the end of this presentation, Cody will reiterate how you can get in touch with us at Reform and submit those stories.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Eric. I think that gives us a good opportunity here for our last question that is somewhat of a layup and actually transitions us into the next slide. So if we can just move on to the next slide. The question was in regards to how can I be involved? How can I volunteer in Be With Reform in Pennsylvania? Well, we obviously can't get this done without you all. So there's a few things right now that you guys can do that would actually allow us to hear from you, and they can be part of our membership. First, you can become a Reform member. You can become a reformer by visiting our website, reformalliance.com, or you can just text reform to 81411. Secondly, you can join our social media team at Reform. We have active Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok pages, and then also give you the opportunity to join us in other live sessions like these in the upcoming months. You can also visit our updated, brand new Pennsylvania Safety Coalition website. You can take action there in the top right-hand corner and sign our petition and fill out our form. We'd love for you to do that. But finally, really, the best way for us to grow our movement is for you to share your knowledge of reform to your friends and family. You are our best asset. We want you to be included. We want you to tell others, and we really can't get this all done without you. But we really appreciate you all hopping on tonight on this Thursday evening, spending about an hour with us. But please make sure you join us. Click those links, text 81411, and become a reformer. But I think that concludes tonight's Reformer Town Hall, our first one, but I hope we have many more in the future. I want to thank our panelists, but most importantly, I want to thank all of you who participated with your comments and by viewing. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night.